Lasers. Lasers are universal. No matter where it's from or how big or small it is, people love shooting lasers no matter what. It just does something to our minds that gives us that specific hit of enjoyment and satisfaction that nothing else can really do. And that effect is on full display with the engineer's futuristic weapon, the Shard Diffractor. The engineer has a pretty diverse arsenal, with ballistics, explosives, high technology, low technology, and of course, energy weapons. His whole kit is very fun, but personally, nothing satisfies my mad scientist cravings like using his heavy energy weapon, the Shard Diffractor. It's elegant, effective, but can sometimes be complicated. There are some interesting quirks to this weapon, and its overclocks come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So then if you guys are ready, let's talk about the Shard Diffractor and the kinds of overclocks it has access to see if it's the secondary weapon to add to your build. By the way, if you want to see more weapon guide videos like this, or just videos in general, be sure to subscribe to never miss another upload.
Identify targets and exterminate. That's how it's done.
The Shard Diffractor is a pretty unique weapon compared to the rest of the dwarf's arsenals in the game. It's the third secondary weapon for the engineer, so you all have to play him a decent amount, at least enough to get him to level 21 to unlock the assignment to acquire it. Powered by a fragment of an armor and heartstone, which I still to this day want to know exactly what it is, the Shard Diffractor inflicts continuous damage to any target that is impacted by its beam, as well as having a small area of effect at the beam's point of impact. The beam also has the innate ability to set enemies on fire, which can be very effective at setting up strong elemental builds and synergies. What's more, when an enemy is killed using this weapon, they disintegrate into a pile of fine, glyphid, powdery ash, which is not only super satisfying, but it also prevents some on-death effects from happening. The Shard Diffractor also features a battery with a maximum charge capacity rather than a conventional ammo system. It works a little bit differently compared to other heat-based weapons in the game. Firing the weapon drains the battery, while releasing the trigger will automatically recharge the battery, drawing from the weapon's total battery capacity. Did I say battery enough times? Furthermore, the battery must be fully charged in between uses, so there is a brief spin-up delay before the weapon can begin firing again. It's a little bit weird to get used to the pacing of this weapon, but once you do get the hang of it, you will understand its rhythm a lot better. So now it's time to talk about the Shard Diffractor's overclocks. As of Season 4, the Shard Diffractor has 6 overclocks, with only 1 clean, 3 balanced, and 2 unstable. Next, as always, we'll go through each of them and talk about what they do and the kinds of ways that you can utilize them effectively. So with that, let's start with the clean overclocks, and the first and only one on the list is efficiency tweaks. The description reads, careful tweaking has resulted in greater charge capacity as well as an increase in total capacity. And here we have the inescapable truth that is the ammo efficiency clean overclock. I suppose since there was only 1 clean overclock for this weapon, we probably should have assumed it was going to be an ammo one. I know they're easy to make, but that also makes them kind of hard to take time to explain. Going through the numbers, it gives you plus 50 to your maximum ammo reserves and plus 25 to the charge capacity, which is essentially the weapon's magazine size. Again, there really isn't anything a whole lot to say about these kinds of overclocks other than that they are just fine. It'll let you fire your beam for longer, which in turn will let you burn things more effectively. Moving on immediately to the balanced overclocks, first we have the automated beam controller. This one reads, removing manual control and automating the fire sequence improves speed of operation and allows for a significant expansion to the total battery capacity. However, the charge capacity had to be reduced to prevent overheating. Manually interrupting the beam stresses the capacitor, resulting in a loss of some of the remaining charge. So this is a bit of a complicated one with several different components. Essentially, it allows you to fire the beam much faster at the cost of not being able to control the beam nearly as well. Breaking down the stat changes, it gives you plus 100 to your max ammo capacity, plus 4 to the discharge rate, which is essentially the rate of fire stat, and reducing the recharge time by 0.2 seconds. This is compensated by a reduction in the charge capacity by 10, and applies an effect that causes the weapon to continuously fire until the battery is completely empty. And if you manually stop this effect, it consumes a huge chunk of the remaining charge. So this overclock is decently good for a crowd control setup, as it gives you a lot more ammo and essentially forces you to hold down the trigger to spray tons of enemies with. While using this overclock, you really do want to go all in on the mass swarm destroying playstyle. The amount of extra ammo given is very high, which can make the constant beam debuff much less hindering, but personally, I don't find myself using this one too terribly often. Shard Diffractor is really good at dealing with single targets, and the engineer has a lot of good crowd control pieces already. Not only that, but you have to kind of make sure that there is a big enough swarm to justify using this overclock so that way you don't burn ammo when you don't want to. Still, if you want to use this to deal with those constant hordes on point extraction missions, then it will help you out a good amount. The next balanced overclock we have is the feedback loop. This one reads, heavy modifications to the weapon keeps excess energy within the beam, increasing the radius and damage of the area of effect while the beam is fired. However, the changes leave little room for the battery, reducing the maximum energy capacity of the weapon. This overclock is also a good source of crowd control, but can also be adept in increasing single target damage as well. Breaking it down, it gives you the feedback loop buff, but at the cost of minus 100 to your maximum ammo capacity. So the feedback loop effect makes it so that way for every second that the beam is continuously held, the weapon will gain a stacking increase to both its radius and area damage. And there is no limit to the amount of stacks that you can get so long as you are holding down the trigger. So this one I use a lot more than the automated beam controller for a few reasons. For one, if you want to go full crowd control, then you could pair this up with the biomass converter mod in tier 5 to start a snowball effect to keep increasing your beam's damage and area, and in turn roasting the bugs a lot faster. On the other hand, this effect inherently will make hurting bigger and tougher enemies much faster. If you have as much charge capacity as you can, then this thing can ramp up damage on single targets very quickly. So for things like dreadnoughts or pretty much any tough boss-like enemy, it can do extremely well. Ultimately, this is one of the few Shard Diffractor overclocks that I find myself using quite a bit. The last balanced overclock option is the Volatile Impact Reactor. This one reads, a mixture of high energy and atomic frequency tuning lets you temporarily turn dirt and rock into magma, damaging and potentially igniting any enemy that walks across it. So this overclock makes the Shard Diffractor work almost in a similar way to the Driller's Flamethrower with its Sticky Flames ability. Going through the numbers, it gives you the Volatile Impact buff at the cost of minus 0.6 to your effect radius and minus 25 to your charge capacity. So the Volatile Impact Reactor makes it so that way whenever the beam touches the ground, it will be turned into liquid hot magma for several seconds. The magma deals fire and heat damage over time and also slows any enemy hit by it as well. So this one is actually pretty useful to use, especially on certain mission types. And if nothing else, it can be pretty fun just to turn the terrain into magma and watch the bugs struggle to get past it. Ultimately, this one can be yet another good form of crowd control that can help you form almost like a defensive fire moat that can be good on things like escort duty, salvage operations, or really any situation where the bugs have to cross a single choke point to get to you. While a little awkward to use at first, if you want to channel your inner driller with this one, it is certainly a good option. Now it's time to go over the unstable overclocks, and honestly, I think the Diffractor has some of the funnest and best ones in the game. First one we have is the Plastcrete Catalyst. The description reads, the beam has been finely tuned to violently react with Plastcrete platforms, increasing AoE damage and range. If the beam is held long enough, the reaction becomes unstable, causing a significant explosion at the impacted point. The tweaks come with a limited charge rate to avoid frying the circuits, and both the charge capacity and total capacity are reduced. So this overclock essentially lets you turn your platforms into high explosive landmines that can do some pretty heavy damage. Breaking it down, it gives you the Plastcrete explosion effect at the cost of minus 50 to your total capacity and plus 0.8 to your recharge time. So to explain the Plastcrete explosion ability a little bit more, when shooting any platforms, splash damage and damage radius of the Shard Diffractor is boosted by 50%. After shooting at any given platform for 1 second, the beam will trigger a big explosion that deals tremendous damage and carves a small amount of terrain. It does decent armor breaking damage, can apply fear to enemies, and has a good sized area of effect. So this overclock is extremely fun to use and allows you to turn your platforms into an offensive bomb that can take out several enemies at once. Keep in mind that when using this overclock, your ammo is going to take a big hit, so you need to be able to understand when to use it or when to hold it back. If you can get that tactic down, it is insanely fun to take out hordes with your platforms of all things. The other unstable overclock option is the Overdrive Booster. The description reads, drastically increase the energy throughout by pressing the reload button while the beam is firing. Unfortunately, maintaining control requires that you stand still when firing a boosted beam, and the weapon cannot stop firing while boosted until the capacitor is fully discharged. Manually interrupting the beam stresses the capacitor, resulting in the loss of some of the remaining charge. So this overclock lets you press the reload button while firing to ramp the power of the Shard Diffractor to over 9,000 and make it even more deadly than it already is. Going through the stats, which the stats screen doesn't tell you the whole picture, it gives you the ability to boost the damage of your beam's DPS. However, while you are boosting its damage, you can't move and the beam fires until it's empty in the same way that it does with the automated beam controller. And lastly, it makes it so that way you have a bigger recharge time before being able to use it again. This overclock is probably one of my personal favorites in the entire game for a few reasons. First, it is insanely fun and satisfying to use, especially when you use it effectively. Second, it's actually really easy to use. used effectively. You have complete control over when it activates and when you use it, so it's really easy to hold it for when you need it and to not use it too excessively. And lastly, although this is listed as an unstable overclock, it really isn't as difficult to use as other unstable overclocks. If you don't activate the overdrive ability, then the diffractor will just work as it normally does with no stat changes. This means that the overdrive booster is extremely user-friendly and accessible. That aside, in terms of actual effectiveness, this thing can decimate hordes of enemies or chew through bosses and dreadnoughts a lot faster than normal. It's incredibly effective at making short work of elimination encounters or just any strong targets that can give you trouble. Ultimately, I think this is the best overclock to use with the diffractor since it does a lot for you without sacrificing too much, and can be useful in almost any mission type or situation. The Shard Diffractor's overclocks have a pretty big range of usefulness, from extremely simple to just downright ridiculous, and hopefully now you have a bit of a better understanding of them and how to use them effectively. If you want to see another specific secondary weapon covered, let me know down in the comments, or perhaps I've already covered it, so be sure to check out the playlist. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you found this video helpful, let me know by hitting those like and subscribe buttons, as it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. Rock and Stone miners, I'll see you in the next video.